Welcome, everybody. All right, today we are talking about existential angst. Now, what is that weird terminology? Existential angst not only derives from the human inability to think, feel, and act in the world or experience a love for life, but it's also from the fear of the possibility of non existence or death. And it can be lonely. It can be isolating. And it can be outright terrifying if your very existence is in question. What are we talking about? We are talking about the meaning of your life and not knowing what that is. And many people, when they reach 18 and when they reach about 40, go through an existential angst. It's who do I want to be? Where do I want to go? And there's so many decisions that they need to be making that they have not made or may not have the capability of making, that they will literally throw themselves into someone else's life and hitch themselves to that train, or they will start making choices and doing drugs or doing something stupid to divert their attention and then end up in some job that they don't like. And then by the time they're 40, they're like, what the hell have I done? Well, I can't believe I've got three kids and a house and all this stuff. And I don't even like my life. I don't even know who I am. I don't even know where I'm going, what I'm doing. This happens all the time. There's a psychologist, Carl Jung, and a philosopher, John Paul Sartre, that had similar thoughts about existential angst and both focused on achieving meaningful existence through the development of inner resources, creative exercise of freedom, overcoming self deception. In essence, the people who experience existential angst feel lost, think they have a purposeless existence, believe they've been abandoned by life. And if you've ever wondered what life is really all about, why you're here, what is your purpose, does your life have meaning, do you ever ask, who am I? These questions have been asked throughout the ages of humanity by philosophers, theologians, psychologists, spiritualists, and almost every human being that ever existed on the planet Earth. Life is full of unanswered questions, especially now that we're in the middle of a global, we have a global economy where nobody knows who the hell they are and everybody wants socialism because they don't want to make a decision for themselves or take any accountability for their existence whatsoever. People are basically lazy and stupid in this day and age, and they promote that. And now they want it in their politics, called the Democratic Party. And those, just as with those who fear the unknown, not knowing the answers to life's most difficult questions can be really unsettling. And our brain likes complete images and thoughts and will fill the gap if something seems incomplete. What they do nowadays is they look at anybody that is decisive in this life and they target them. Because indecisive, existential angst people basically love to say what they don't like, but they have no answers what they do like. They have vague answers of what they do like. They have theological and psychological and philosophical ideas of what they like, but they don't really know how to get there. People that have existential angst are indecisive people. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to make decisions, and they lack character. And the funny thing about character is, and the funny thing about making decisions is, you teach people how to love you by the decisions that you make. This is a very important thing. Many of the people who have existential angst make reactive decisions. That means somebody had to do something, and now I'm going to make a decision based on that. If it doesn't have an answer, people make one up. People with anxiety, not having clear and confident answer to life's questions, can cause them unpleasant thoughts that are catastrophizing in nature. So what they do is they live in hypotheticals. People that fear start to calculate what are the worst possible things that can happen. and how can I prepare for it? So they spend a lot of energy and a lot of time in their head calculating outcomes for every single thing that they do. And any kind of decision that they make, they want to put it off because they don't want to fail, or they don't want to worry, or they don't want to have to fear. They don't want to have to do the work of calculating. They can't stand it because their brain is so indecisive. Basically, their existence on this planet is mediocre at best, taking up a lot of space, but not serving a lot of purpose. So a purpose-driven life is never about you. But people who have existential angst, everything is about them. Everything is about them, and how can it please their ugly ass? How can it make their ugly ass feel better? That's about all they have. So if you're a decisive person, you can always change your mind, but you set directions for yourself. So a purpose-driven life, once again, according to Rick Warren, in the first line written in Purpose-Driven Life, it's not about you. It can't be about you. It has to be about how people will seek you for what you have to offer them. What is it that you want to offer the human race that they need? That is your purpose. That needs to be your passion. Many people lament about the past and what they should or shouldn't have done, while others worry about the future and live in the what if world. Some fear the unknown. Some bring great anxiety upon themselves when they reflect on how little control they can believe they have of their lives. And some people feel helpless and have an absurd idea that others should guide them through their lives and answer the tough questions for them, and then they can sit around and complain about that person all day long every day and make them out to be the enemy and the worst possible person on the planet Earth. And then they probably are married to them, so they got to somehow have good moments with them. But the bottom line is they're always a victim. Existential angst turns people into victims of themselves, because they think they are so freaking smart and so great that they live in all of their own hypotheses. And all the hypotheses are about how not to do something and why you shouldn't do something. And so they live in their fear. And fear begets atheism. Fear begets agnostics, because they live in fear. What else do they have? Because life is actually faith-based. And that's the weird part. Everything you do is a leap of faith. You don't know how it's going to answer. You don't know what the final result's going to be. You take leaps of faith. You get married. You have children. You take a job. You buy a new car. You go to the grocery store. You don't know what's going to happen. You have no idea what's going to happen. So what do? Sit around? Now, people that are existential angst are going to sit around calculating what's going to happen if I go to the store. The crack addict's going to kill me if they're outside the door. Oh my God, if I buy that car, I'm probably going to lose my job, and then I'm going to have debt, and then I don't know how I'm going to pay it, and I'm probably going to go bankrupt, and blah, 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 blah. That's existential angst. That's how people get into it, because they sit around with their own hypothesis and they buy them. And then they run for office. Of course, if they're in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I live, they all have to run for office because they have to prove out their bad hypothesis on everybody else in the world and make everybody else's life miserable, because they are so freaking smart. They are the dumbest people on the planet, emotionally, humanly, but they think that since they have intellect, they think their hypotheses are so wonderful. And they want to torture everybody with their stupidity. Mindfulness teaches us to be present in the moment, not in the past, not in the future. If we can stay focused on the present and the unpleasant event happens, we can do something about it. That's called having faith. I've been this far through my life. I could probably figure it out if something bad happens. It may not be great. It may not be what I wanted. But guess what? I'll probably just deal with it. I will figure it out as it happens. Or if I see it coming, maybe I can prepare for that. Many people think about how interesting as humans that we cannot know where we came from and where we will be going, but we have the ability to ask the questions. Our species seem to content on just being. As humans, we're able to ask why. This is where the angst comes from. For people who feel their lives have no clear meaning and no justified purpose. Well, the basis of existentialism, which is a philosophy, the basis of it is being able to create meaning in the moment by being fully present. This is where Viktor Frankl came in back in the 40s when he lived in concentration camps in Germany as a Jew. He was a medical doctor. And what he decided to do is the only thing that the Nazis could not take away from him was the ability to be present with the people that surrounded him. That's what they could not take from him. And so he was fully present. And instead of living in the fear of being dead or being killed or living in the past, he decided to make memories in the moments he was in with the people around him. That means that he had conversations of what life would be like outside the concentration camp, what he would be doing right now, what he wants to do when all this is over, what he's passionate about, what his purpose is, what he learned today from somebody else, what he can learn from the people around him. And he made the best of that for 3 years. What did he do? He came to the United States and taught prisoners how to live in prison and how to make a life where you are and how to create meaning in the place that you are, which brought prison safety into a place where education can even enter into the jails, into the prisons. So, it's really important to understand that we are all in a search for meaning. And a lot of us feel very alone in that process. However, it's the thing that all of us are doing, is searching for meaning in our lives. But many people live in coping skills. They live in their drugs, they live in their alcohol, they live in their sports, they live in their pornography, they live in their fantasy world, they live in their books, they live in their video games. Because they don't want to think about the meaning of their life and how they could serve a purpose for other people. And where do they want to serve a purpose for other people? Since these people are lost in their life, like the 30-year-old or 40-year-old living in his parents' basement, living off of their retirement until they die and hoping to inherit whatever's left, these dudes have no life because they're just coping. They're coping. They're living a false existence. You have to understand that therapy is viewed differently by different people. Some come in to vent about problems at work or home or talk about their less than satisfactory marriages, problems with their kids. Some people seek help with their anxiety, their depression, other disorders. They also come in to talk about their own or loved ones' addictions, discuss their elderly parents or their siblings. Many people have issues that bring them about quantifiable results. But there's issues that all of us really need to examine, and it's very, very important. The feeling of being lost, the feeling of being confused, the feeling of lacking meaning or purpose in your life, the feeling of being lonely in your marriage, wondering who the person in the mirror is. We all have to discover these things in our life, but that means that we have to have the ability to be fully present in the moment that we exist. It's really important to understand that existential life and existential angst is an anxiety because we don't know where we belong. And the deal is that at 18 years old is now 32 years old. Why is that? Because 18-year-olds are faced with so many choices that they have to make at 18 that is so broad and so micro decision If you're going to be an engineer, what kind of engineer are you going to be? If you're going to be a doctor, what kind of doctor are you going to be? If you're going to be an attorney, what kind of attorney are you going to be? They have to answer very, very specific questions about what they're going to do. And guess what? If you're going to go to a nice school, especially one that has a bunch of crazy Middle Easterners telling you that, Muhammad is the way to go, which we have in every university in the United States of any substantial value. The bottom line is that we as human beings think that we have to invest 300, $400,000 in our education if we don't know what we want to be or where we want to go with our life. Kids are having trouble making those choices at a young age. It takes time. It takes experiential learning to discover who am I. And that's a hard one. It's a hard one. And the other thing is that corporations are not loyal to you. Now, there is no such thing as retirement. If you work for a corporation, there's a good chance within 3 years, whatever they hired you for is going to disappear, and whatever skill set you had is going to expire if you have not continued to train yourself. There's also a good chance if you go to college nowadays that whatever career you decide to go into is going to be completely different by the time you graduate. And there's a real good chance, especially at the higher end universities, that you're going to get a professor that knows how to teach the field they're in, but never actually was in the field that they're in. And even if they were in the field they're in, the field is nothing like what they're teaching you now because they don't know their ass from a hole in the ground because technology moves so fast. It's taking responsibility. Back in the earlier days when 18-year-old meant adult life, you either went to college or you worked in a blue collar job. That used to be the choices you have. Now it's extremely complex. If we want to avoid existential angst, we have to take responsibility for our thinking, our behavior, our feelings, and these can raise anxiety, especially when you don't have the answers. Not only that, if we extrapolate our anxieties to the nth degree, we could come to most people's greatest fear, which is the purpose of existentialism and understanding it, the fear of death. Now, death's something that all of us are going to experience. Everybody, every living being on the planet is going to die. But many people have a lot of trouble with that because they don't know what death's going to look like. What is on the other side? So they try to find the answers in themselves. And if they find the answers in themselves, they sometimes can make peace with death. But the deal with existentialism is that you really have to grapple with one thing. Do you control death? No. You don't control what happens after you die. You die. And guess what? You have to have faith that what's on the other side of it is going to be whatever's on the other side of it. But it's probably, if you're going to be an intelligent human being, it probably has a lot to do with what happens to your soul and where your soul goes and how your soul moves on. That's probably what happens in death. Your soul leaves your body. I think all of us understand that we have a soul, and your soul, something happens to it, but it's probably not going to be in your body. It's probably left your body and moved on. And that's something that all of us have to make peace with. So let's look at a series of questions. Existentialism. Who are you? What do you fear the most about not knowing who you are? So what if you don't get to know the person inside you? Because a lot of people will avoid that question for their whole lives. These are things that we have to think about. All right, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and talk more about existential angst and how to work through it. So come back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, we're talking about existential angst. Whether life has meaning or purpose, or whether we can even get to fully know who am I, can be looked at in different ways. In the big picture, the questions that we have exploring comes from an age old thinking on a massive everything scale. Why are we here? What is my purpose in this life? The great existential theorist that I just talked about, Viktor Frankl, once said that those who have a why to live can bear with any how to live. That's the thing. Once you discover why you are here, then you discover how to live. But people who are indecisive just want to make everybody else miserable because they're miserable. And that's what existential angst is. They can't find their purpose or passion. They have no will to live. And if they did have a will to live, they would discover why they're here and who they want to make their life better. Who do they want to focus on to improve other people's lives? What skill do they want to have that they can give to others and make their lives better? For many, the questions are too incomprehensible to even attempt to answer. However, some try to think of purpose in a micro, more compact, break the answers into bite-sized pieces. People who report their purpose in life is to take care of their kids. Others find meaning in being a loving spouse, or maybe a good son or daughter. Some find their purpose through their religion or their faith. Teachers find purpose in educating their students. Healthcare professionals like doctors, social workers, nurses, and others feel they have a calling to help people in need. As with other things, it's up to each and every one of us to take responsibility to find a purpose in your life. And we need to be introspective enough to look deeply inside ourselves to see who's there. You have to understand. You're going to have to understand. You have to ask the question of yourself: is what is the meaning of my life? And the meaning means I find meaning. So, for instance, you may have meaning in a discussion where you're talking to your spouse, and one of you, the meaning is, I'm afraid if we discipline our children, they're never going to like us. The other one may think, if we discipline our children, they better learn the lesson that we're trying to teach them. And so one may want to teach the lesson, and the other may be worried about the relationship. So there's where meaning is. Now that we understand the meaning of our argument, we have a means to solve our argument. You see, we all have meaning. We all have things that are meaningful to us. We have to understand each other and what is meaningful to each other. And that's what makes our lives interesting. That is what makes compromise. But that has an emotional element that is not logical. And if you live in the analytical world, like most people do today, the robotic world, emotional elements are not very substantial. They're not something you can quantify. Therefore, they're not important. So a lot of people don't have any meaning to their life because they have no emotions and no feelings that they share with other people. Like the previous show that I talked about, emotional repression. People who are emotionally repressed have a one way of feeling emotions. They have their little hobbit holes, like their little pornography world, or their little smoking world, or their little pot world, or their little druggy world, or their little alcohol world, or their relationship with their job. They have their little hobbit holes where they can feel emotion, but outside of that, everything else is transactional to them. Their children, their spouse, their home, their life, everything else is just robotic. That is an emotionally repressed person because they have to keep their emotions to themselves. It's a one-way street. People that enjoy reciprocity are the ones who worry about the existence of our life, the meaning of our life, because that means I vest in relationships. And that's what it takes to be married. Unfortunately, these people breed and marry somebody that thinks they're supposed to get a relationship because they may have got it in the honeymoon phase when they were horny. But outside of that, after that, they married the turd and then they find out they have no emotions whatsoever and they're jacking off to pornography all day long. And so the deal is they're emotionally repressed. They don't know how to share their emotions. They don't want to share their emotions. They don't want to be vulnerable. And so they want to live in their own little video game world and fantasize about having sex with all kinds of creatures and things out there in all kinds of different ways, but they don't want to have it with you. And that is pervasive in our society today. And we need to understand that these people are not worried about the meaning of life. They're worried about the meaning of their next jack off. They're worried about the meaning of the next thing they eat. They're worried about the next pleasure that they can have, but they're not worried about relationships. And many people go through life without a purpose. That means their relationships are not important. So, guess what? When they die, nobody gives a rat's ass about them or their life because they did not have relationships. They did not invest in relationships. If you don't invest in relationships, you have no meaning in your life. Nobody cares. You're already dead. You know, the not knowing is it's taken as far as we can go. The fear of death for some people is the ultimate fear of their life. How am I going to die? Do you think that when a person dies, that's how they want to be remembered? Oh, that's the suicidal one. Oh, that's the person who died in the car accident. Oh, yeah, that's the person who drowned. Oh, yeah, that's the person who died of a heart attack. Oh, yeah, they died of cancer. You think that's how we want to be remembered? No. Why in the heck do you get up in the morning? Why in the heck do you have relationships? Why in the heck do we care about people? We want to be remembered for our relationships. We want to be remembered for what we do in our life, what our passions are, what our purpose is. We don't want to be remembered for how we die. That is the least most important moment of your life. The most important moments of your life are the one where you're off your fat ass, out of your chair, not watching television, and actually laying down and having a relationship with your kids, playing with Legos or doing something where you are interacting with other human beings. That is when your life is meaningful. Outside of that, you're just a lump of crap sitting in the backyard waiting for somebody to scoop it up. You know, we struggle to find an appropriate place to share our thoughts and how we see the way our lives unfold. You know, we believe this is a good place to share in our lives. Life is a good place to share. But do we want to live a reactive life or do we want to live a responsive life? Now, adults like a responsive life, but that means that you have to make decisions. People that live a reactive life, oh, the kids are angry, so we have to deal with that. Oh my God, everybody's hungry, so we got to deal with that. Oh my gosh, we ran out of money, so we have to figure out how to do that. There's a lot of people that live reactively. You could do that all day long, but you will never have meaning to your life. If you want to have meaning to your life, you have to be responsive. You choose your responses. You choose how to live your life. You choose how to deal with things. You choose how to live. But many people that are not existentialistic live like a pinball. They just hurtle themselves through life, bouncing off one pin and another and another and another and another and another, but they're not in control of their lives. If you want to enjoy your existence, the way you guide your existence is deciding how do I want my life to give back to others, and how can I care about the people that I'm giving back to? Since we can't predict the future, every interaction has the potential to send us in new, exciting directions. But we have to be fully present to be able to recognize what those directions and possibilities are. We have to be calm enough to walk through our life and understand there's a lot of things that we react to, and we could choose how to react. And there's a lot of things that we could do to form new ideas on what to do, and that's called learning from failure, learning from experiences. COVID taught us a lot of things. And that is, we are our own worst enemy. Living in our head is the worst possible thing a human being can do. Locking a human being in their house with a mask on is about the dumbest thing the human race could have ever done. The dumbest thing the human race could have ever done. But since we live with hypothetically semi-intelligent people with no emotional IQ whatsoever, they all want us to be locked up. All the people who think they have the answers don't have the answers. They have an hypothesis. And that's the sad part because they're not even willing to test their hypothesis unless they could test it on everybody else, which is what COVID created. The Democrats destroyed our life with this stupidity. If you lock people in their house, in their heads, they are going to have a hard time having relationships or any meaning to their life. So what they're going to do is create meaning in things that have no meaning, like video games, like reading things or doing things or social media, brainless, watching stupid MSNBC or some other dumbass channel like CNN or something like that, where they get all this demented weirdos and producers that think they know everything and want to tell us what the truth is, and it's only their truth. It's a biased truth. It has nothing to do with what the truth is whatsoever. They want to bend your existence and warp your brain, and that's what they did by locking us all up in our prisons, in our homes for 5 years practically. It's insane what these people did to our lives, and it's insane that people are dumb enough to vote for these idiots who advocate for only themselves. The scary questions at any stage of life, especially during middle age, as we begin to see our abilities and our power in the world decline, can be especially terrifying if we see close friends or family members suffer death and disease. This is a part of life at 40 where you realize nobody thinks about you that much. They really don't. They don't think about what's going to be great for you. They don't think about all the things that you do for them in your life. They don't think about it. You're not that important. And when you're 40, you realize you don't have to get your identity from your existential outside perspective. I don't have to get my identity from my friends. I don't have to get my identity from work. I don't have to get my identity from my kids. I don't have to get identity from my spouse. I need to get my identity for who I am and stop living apologetically. I need to live in the context of who the hell am I? What do I want to give back to the human race? Where am I wise? Where am I stupid? What do I want to shore up? And what experiences do I need to have in this life that are going to serve a purpose for others, including my spouse, my kids, and everything that I've taken responsibility for? Existential anxiety requires a combination of strategies integrated over a long period of time. And what we have to understand is it often comes at a time when issues related to aging and the prospect of death become very real. Sometimes after the death of a peer, somebody our age, this often pushes people to reflect on the religious lessons that were taught as a child. For most people, their existential, religious, and spiritual beliefs were not chosen. They were bequeathed to them at birth, and the belief system we were born into may not be the one that best fits our adult worldview. We should be reading books about belief systems, discovering what similarities and differences about belief systems have with your own. Interview people with spiritual lives with different traditions. If you think about Jesus was a soul living a human life. We are humans with a soul. What Jesus did is he found the purpose of his existence is in your soul. It's not within your human. We all are interconnected. He was trying to demonstrate to the world that if you lead with your soul, you will be pure and you will be good, and all of the things laid out in the Ten Commandments and in the Bible become very simple. But if you live within your human, you're probably going to be a prostitute. You're probably going to be a tax collector. You're probably going to be fairly selfish. You're probably going to make up 1,000 rules for your spouse and make your life completely miserable because you yourself don't even know who the hell you are. You're probably going to turn your children into something horrible because you're so demented and caught up in your own bullshit that you don't know which way is up. However, people that understand that our souls are good, if you can get yourself back to your soul, life is pretty simple. It's about relationships. It's about loving one another. It's about supporting one another. It's about living in a human life and making it easier for each other to live and caring about each other and getting through your life together. Where you feel the most accepted is where you feel at home. That is what a soul looks for in this life. Where am I most accepted? But if you're going to be accepted, you have to accept others. Judgmental black and white people have a hell of a time getting through their life because they do everything to avoid other people. They find every reason to be the god of their own life rather than someone who is worthy and willing to have relationships with other people on any term outside of their own. We have to explore meetup groups, chat rooms. We have to have dialogues with each other. We have to explore. The basis when I went to school in England, which was in my undergraduate, I learned in a Socratic method. That's the way they teach in many universities in England. They don't do that in the United States, but in England, that's what we do. In the United States, it's all based on grades. In England, what's interesting is it's based on Socratic method, which is you sit in a classroom, you read the book, the professor or the doctor facilitates the discussion amongst the students of what they read. And before you even speak up, you have to actually repeat back what the person before you communicated so that you can demonstrate that you are learning from others. You're not thinking you're the only one with ideas. Okay, so this student thought that blah, 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 blah. Now, here's what I think. So before you put your stupidity forward, your point of view, your perspective on what you read, you have to communicate what others communicated. That means that we all learn from each other. And that's the way life should be. We should all be like the philosophers sitting on the Acropolis steps, sharing ideas amongst each other and hearing and learning from each other. That's the better life. That is the smarter life. That is the consultative life. That is a shared existence. And we all have to have respect for each other to do that. Now, do the people who are elected to Congress do that and the Senate do that anymore? No, because we have a bunch of idiot, advocate, democratic, liberal jerks who don't understand anything but what makes their ugly ass happy. And they think they have the answers to everything, but they have the answers to nothing. They have no ideas, but they have every reason to complain about every single thing that ever existed on the planet Earth. And it's sad. We don't live Socratically anymore. But that's the most intelligent way to live, and that's where you find the less existential angst. So there are some core themes. There are four ultimate concerns: death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness. These are the fundamentals of how we grapple with these four things: death, which is inevitable; freedom, which is the burden of choice, meaning you have to be a decisive person; isolation, which is fundamental loneliness; and meaninglessness. If we grapple with those four things, we're probably going to have a better balanced life. We're probably going to be better balanced people. There's also an aspect of existential angst is the feeling of nothingness. It's a feeling that life is hollow, purposeless, that one is lost and abandoned. This is where the people who are atheists and agnostic live. They live in the purposeless life. I'm only here to be alive. That's all I am. Well, these dudes, they have a lot of answers about what is in the universe and what the universe is doing and how it's operated and how it's constructed. But they don't have a lot of answers about why the universe is. That's a spiritual question. God forbid they tackle that one. All right, we're going to take another break and we're going to come right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about existential angst. There is some aspects of existential angst that we need to talk about. One is common triggers, significant transitions like aging, could be midlife crisis, quarter life crisis, traumatic events, death of a loved one, major career changes, being fired from a job, being divorced. These are all big, big, big triggers of existential angst because it's you got to go, where am I going next? What's my future going to look like? What's it going to be a single parent with two kids, having no income and only a very small skill set, and I'm married to this total jerk who all they do is work and tell me how to live and sit on their fat ass eating Doritos? That is a common problem. And the deal is that we as people have to struggle with those things because we make choices and then we have to adapt our choices. That is what life is. Learning to be resilient, learning to adapt and have faith in yourself that whatever the choices you're going to make may not result in great things, but you will adapt and you will make it through. You will figure out a way. That is called a will, the will to survive. Many people have a broken will. They broke their own will or they let somebody break it for them. And so they sit around complaining all day long, every day, but they have no purpose. They serve an existential angst because they cannot make one decision except for one that is forced on them, like, oh my God, I got to go pee. That's about all they can do. Physical and emotional symptoms, intense worry. This is people with existential angst. Intense worry, panic attacks, difficulties with decision making, social withdrawal, obsession with their mortality. Then there's psychological things like roots in philosophy. The concept is deeply rooted in philosophy, particularly from thinkers like Kierkegaard back in the 1700s, called existentialism, later developed to form of therapeutic experiential psychotherapy, which was created by Viktor Frankl. While uncomfortable, psychologists often view existential anxiety as a natural response that signifies an opportunity for growth and for people to take ownership of their lives. Unfortunately, people do not like to take ownership of their lives anymore. They want to be victims of somebody else who makes decisions for them, like their mommy and daddy, who saved endlessly and worked their butts off to save money while you sit on your fat ass in the basement complaining about dinner. That's pretty much, sadly, a lot of what's out there nowadays. And these are the people that want to run the world. I can't believe it. It's sad. But these people who worked their butts off and saved all this money, what did they buy? They bought the fat ass in their basement who does nothing with their life but complain and will never get married, never take accountability for anything unless they have to. It's kind of sad. You saved your whole life for that? Okay, then there's the coping mechanism, seeking meaning. Actively engage in creative endeavors, building relationships, contributing to something larger than yourself. Now we're making our way out of existential angst, accepting freedom, embracing the responsibility for your own actions, making conscious choices rather than avoiding them. Actually, encouraging yourself to accept anxiety as a part of your human condition and use it as a way to create a meaningful life. If you're going to live in fear, create meaning from the fear. Use it as a motivator. There's also mindfulness. That is living in the moment. That is called a meaningful life. Grounding yourself in the present moment reduces the overwhelming abstract nature of fear. You know, our society, things are changing at a very fast speed. Existential dread has also become increasing common experiences. And in this profound psychological state, it affects many people grappling with life's fundamental questions. Understanding the psychology behind existential dread feels offers valuable insights into human nature and guides us towards emotional well-being. So what is it? It encompasses the overwhelming anxiety and despair you experience when confronting life's fundamental questions about purpose, mortality, and the human condition. That's called existential dread. The mental health state of existential dread often triggers a sense of meaninglessness, and it can lead to intense worry, pain, and other negative emotions. And it stems from the realization that your existence may lack inherent meaning, which means you haven't really thought about much except for yourself. You really haven't thought about how can my life connect with other people. Maybe it's the restaurant that I build and how I cook. Can that be a meaningful thing in my life? Can it be that I'm a conductor of a train moving people from one way to another place? Can it be that I'm solving a problem that people died that didn't need to die, that I could solve the problem by inventing something that will change the outcome? You know, there's meaningful lives all the way through the history of human race. However, it takes a person to desire to have a meaningful life, to do meaningful things in our existence. It takes people who have empathy and concern for others. It takes people who care about relationships to make the difference in people's lives. You can be a highly intellectual person, but if you have no desire to have relationships, you're not going to make great changes. You may invent something that could create great change, but it probably doesn't have the vision without the emotional EQ. In ancient Greek, philosophers like Aristotle, Epicurus, pondered the nature of existence and the human condition. Aristotle explored the purpose and virtue of life. Epicurus focused on the pursuits of happiness and the avoidance of pain, laid early in the foundation of our existence. And they recognized the inherent uncertainties that life brought and sought frameworks to the meaning of life. That's philosophy. If you go to the 20th century, things like Jean Paul Sartre, Martin Heidegger, they delved into deeper, more human experiences. Sartre's notion of existence precedes essence, and that means that our existence will happen when we decide that our life has an essence by giving to others what they need. That's when your life is the most important. And so we as people have to know that we have givens of existence, often highlighted. Irvin Yalom described an inescapable, foundational, universal human challenges that generate anxiety. Once again, it's the four things: death, freedom, isolation, meaninglessness. These concerns are inevitable parts of our existence, but they propel your intelligence forward when you take on these concepts and work through them in your life. It can create peace. Peace is accepting the unacceptable. That is how we arrive at peace. Taking the unacceptable things about life and turning them into how can I accept them? Because if you accept the unacceptable, you have created the baseline that you have to work from, and that is called peace. If you want to overcome existential angst, you have to accept uncertainty. You have to ground yourself in the moment. You have to create personal meaning, and you have to have faith that you will find a way with other people's help or with your own means. The strategies to heal existential angst is practicing mindfulness, is the ability to make decisions and change your mind if you have to and adapt your decisions. Engage in meaningful activities like connecting with people, focusing on immediate values rather than uncontrollable unknowns. This is important. Mindfulness and grounding means that I am trying to learn how to live in the moment. I am trying to learn how to be. If you can do that, you have a place to connect with others. If you can create personal meaning, life may not have a predetermined purpose. Focus on what gives you joy, what gives you fulfillment. Joy is a choice. Fulfillment is a choice. Relationships, hobbies, volunteering, these can be very powerful things. We have to understand that we have to accept that this life is uncertain. But at the same time, we have to learn to have faith that we can work through it. We also have to connect with other people. We are tribal creatures. We don't live well isolated. We have to be together. That's why these idiots that created the COVID scares and tortured us for 4 or 5 years with the Biden crazy ass administration. These people should be in prison. These people should be somewhere isolated from the world because they are contaminant. They are horrible, horrible human beings. They think they are gods. That's what we have in these cities like New York and Seattle and Los Angeles. People that think they know everything, but they have no common sense whatsoever. But they love to make up all the laws that we have to live by. They love to run for office and tell us how to exist. We need to get rid of that factor. We need to get back to people that are Socratic and care about each other's opinions, care about each other's points of view, and are seeking solutions, good solutions that help everybody. Distraction and creativity means we engage in hobbies, create projects that redirects our negative energy towards positive, engaging things. And we also want to lose the rumination, it means that we take a break from living in our own heads by trying to solve everything on our own. We are consultative creatures. We need to consult each other. We need to communicate. People are learning how to communicate less and less and less in this existence. Now that we have social media, people think that whatever the idiot is that gets on social media and tells you some factual thing that they don't know is a fact, but they think that they are so freaking smart that they have all the answers, and you better listen to them, especially the Hollywood maniacs that have podcasts. You guys, you got to cut this crap out. It's opinions. That's how you have to take it. They're opinions. They're opinions, and you can seek them or not seek them, but most people want to have cognitive bias. They want somebody out there that's reinforcing their point of view rather than seeking somebody that has a different point of view that they can actually learn from. We can learn from each other. We can even learn from the maniacs and the liberals, but we don't have to follow them. Relationships, while creating lower peaks, are more predictive of long-term contentment. Relationships is about the idea that the process in life is the outcome. It's not the outcome, is the process. Many people these days want all the things right now. They want everything to happen right now. They want to have control of everything. We want very short, very solution-based existence. Not a good idea. Life is a process. We have to invest in the process, and that is where the outcome is. We have multiple outcomes all the way through our life by investing in the process of living. That is where You have to have an existential, purposeful desire of where in the journey do you want to impact people's lives and how frequently do you want to impact other people's lives. So we have to understand that existentialism is a very complex but very core thing that all of us need to examine in ourselves. It is a very important factor in our human existence. And we have to learn how to channel the energy that we have, how to channel the lives that we have, how to channel our creative energy into an existential existence where we have purpose and meaning, where our life is not about us, it's about others. It's about how we serve other people. Anything hard makes your life easier. People that do hard things and invest in doing hard things learn how to make other people's life easier. That is part of having a purposeful life. I want to thank everybody for listening. That's our show. I love hearing from you. You can do that on our webpage, voiceamericamedia.com or libsyn, libsyn.com, Dr. Gary Bell's Absurd Psychology. Now remember, the only time we're important is when we make decisions. Life is an experiment. The more you make, the better you have of a life. Also, an existential map has you here written all you are here written all over it. Thank you for listening, everybody.